Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing Queer. This was directed by Luca Guadagnino. This is Guadagnino's second film of the year after Challengers, which was released earlier in the spring. I've talked about Guadagnino many times on this channel, I feel like, and so people know that I have never connected with him emotionally despite his impeccable taste in aesthetic. His knowledge of historical artistic movements is so on point, his taste in music, all of it is amazing. I just find his works to be artistically overwrought and frustratingly abstract. And I think that just has to do with maybe his lack of interest in concrete emotion, concrete characterization so far as we know it. He leans more into like a postmodern style, which is kind of more highbrow in its approach. In these cases, we're often using a lot of visual symbolism and all of that to reflect maybe the character's anterior mind, but for me, most of the time, it just feels like a long-winded aesthetic way of expressing something that is ultimately fairly simplistic, and especially underdeveloped from a writing perspective. I have the same problems, the same criticisms with this film that I do pretty much every other Luca Guadagnino film that I have seen, and yet I'm glad that I saw this film. It was unexpected. The craft is extremely evident in this film, and I think it's one of the more like fever dreamy, impressionistic films, very nostalgic films maybe of the entire year. It's gorgeous to experience, I have to admit, and there is something to this journey of self-exploration, human connection that I don't know, I liked the approach in a way. It's kind of wandering and winding, yes, meandering to a fault. And the conceit of this film, I think, is far too thin to stretch out all of the tension, but again, it was unique. This film is based on a William Burroughs novel that came out in the 1980s of the same name. It takes place in Mexico City in the 1950s, and it is about a character named Lee, who's kind of a stand-in for Burroughs. But Lee in this film is portrayed by Daniel Craig, and he is a character who has a lust for life. He loves tequila, he loves heroin, he loves cocaine. He's also quite virile, and he's often hooking up with men in bars, going back home with them. He is a gay character, obviously. But the setting in this whole first act, I mean, it's in the whole film, but just in the first act in particular, I really enjoy the way that, characters hang in corners, the way you float from place to place, from one street bar to the next. It's so late 40s, early 1950s MGM musical, and it made me think of like An American in Paris by Vincent Minnelli, which is a film I adore. There's a leisurely quality to the setting in that film and the feeling, but there's also like this melancholia. It is an escape for artists who maybe cannot find their place, and they're often aimless or destructive. They cannot come down to reality, to me, is what that film represents in a weird way. So it's the mix of the loneliness and this intoxicating fantasy of France, and I love the way that Queer captured that spirit. It's the colors, it's the cinematography, it is the charismatic swagger of Daniel Craig as he is walking from bar to bar in that linen suit with a cigarette. With him, there is just this seasoned sense of knowing how to own a room and knowing how to own a shot. There is a gruffness and like an aged exterior to him that I think makes him more and more compelling as an actor, as a movie star. I think this is maybe one of the best, if not the best, performance that Daniel Craig has ever given. The way he is able to manifest emotional pain through the physicality and the sexuality was devastating and pathetic. He's playing somebody who is deeply sad, deeply lost, and he's trying so hard to connect to another person, I think, hoping that it might solve a lot of his problems. And, I think his vulnerability, his weariness is almost, it is too much to exist healthily. And you have to think his pleasure centers are completely out of whack. So it's like he doesn't even have a solid baseline to build from. But of course, in the film, Craig's character meets this chiseled young man who is quite mysterious, who is disconnected perhaps, but Craig's character falls head over heels in love with him almost immediately. And it's that longing, it's the juxtaposition between the character, Craig plays, where it's like he's just so in love, his whole world is lighting up with colors and joy and all this stuff. And then there's this complete emotional blockage from the other person where it's like, the feelings are clearly not returned. It is heartbreaking, and not necessarily due to the emotional vulnerability I'm feeling from the film, but more what Craig is bringing to the role. I think he's making the emotions as vivid and vital to the cinematic experience as he could. I do think the mistake is thinking that this film is meant to be about love and relationships under a particular social filter at a certain time. But no, to me, this is a film about pain. It's about limerence. It's about the inability to connect with the person that is right next to you that you want to connect with so badly. And it's the nature of how, we ask all of these spiritual, existential questions about life and meaning and evolution just to understand this miraculous feeling. It's a whole odyssey and it's so complex, and yet it always comes back to the most basic, innocent question, and it is, does he like me? I think it's a unique spin on a movie star trope to have somebody like James Bond, the steely-eyed killing machine, and yet we're funneling all that intensity and rage into something more soulful. I think the transition between Bond and this role is effortless, and if only the film could match him. It is important to note, I think, that Burroughs, who, as I mentioned before, wrote the piece that this is adapted from, he was a Beat Generation writer from the 1950s, so naturally there's going to be like an experimental angle to his writings, and obviously the Beat Generation is very consciously nonconformist. This is just a personal thing, but to me that aspect of the modernist era was really interesting at a certain point in my life, but I find at this point I more appreciate it than I enjoy it. But I do think it is very important for this film to capture the essence of the Beat Generation, and I have to say it does it extremely well. Like I said, there's this dreamy, neon-tinged look, like a melancholia to the entire thing, and it does remind me very much of just sad artistic destruction. And there is like an unreliable narration in the film that just, it represents a state of disillusionment. But at the same time, there's something to the messiness structurally that is a detriment to me overall. And I think it's because the movie needs a firmer grasp on the core of things rather than focusing so much on the exterior. The threads connecting these scenes just feel too loose for my taste. And I mentioned this when I reviewed Maria not too long ago. It's like, if you're trying to make a house better, maybe don't polish all of the beautiful like marble and the finery over and over again while it's sparkling everything. It's already beautiful. It's like, maybe go address the leaking pipe in the corner. I don't think it's to the same degree in Queer, but it is still aggressively apparent, at least from my perspective. I think there's just too much focus on like the artiness and the human experience being represented more through like psychedelic symbolism and all of this stuff. And to me, that's more just a distraction rather than it being like a true vehicle to explore your characters. I think that you can do that. I've seen some extraordinary sequences that do. They're just very difficult to pull off. Our main character, like I said, is intriguing. He has a lost soul that I think you want to follow, but it's something about the journey with him where it feels as if you've experienced more the embellishments rather than anything honest and meaning. And so it feels unsatisfying. I just wanted to understand his bleeding heart more than anything else in this film, because once you can understand that to a degree, I think suddenly the urge to understand all of these complex ways that we weave the human connection and sex into our purpose, suddenly it feels broken in. It's something that you want to chase. I don't think you need some crazy ambitious conceptual framework unless that is coming from a place, again, that is honest, that is on firm ground. And I think we could have done with maybe less anachronistic modern song choices, like, they play Nirvana. It felt jarring, and I don't think it was necessary. It's like I would have rather seen that edge and that modern sensibility, again, built more into the characters, their essence. I don't know, man. This is an interesting film. I'm very glad that I saw it, and I keep thinking about it, and yet so little of it came together for me. I wouldn't call this film accessible, so there are going to be certain people that I think really lean into the psychedelic flavors, the experimental quality of it. And other people I think are going to find it empty, where it relies too much on a thin conceit. I think somewhere in the middle, but it bugs me that I walked away from this film feeling an emptiness. And I often do with Guadagnino. I felt it in Challengers. I felt it in Suspiria. Call Me by Your Name. It's the same story every single time. There is a key ingredient missing that is keeping these films from becoming the showstoppers that I think they have the potential to be. It's like when you eat a sandwich and maybe there's the meat is missing or something. It's like, it still has the potential to be good and interesting, but you need that meat for it to be a sandwich. That said, I actually am going to recommend this film. I don't know if I would pay full price for it, but I think it's worth your time just for visually, and the experience of it is quite interesting. And like I said, I think this is a career highlight for Daniel Craig. But anyway, that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist. I do commission portraits and I sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who are great. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.